looks like it's 6 o'clock, so we will begin this evening's webinar. My name is Brianne Hicks, and I'm a member of the NEHS Advisory Council, and I have the pleasure of introducing our guest speaker today, Mr. Tom Wingate. Mr. Wingate serves as the head teacher and owner of the British International School, the Wingate School in Mexico City. I first met Mr. Wingate when I was teaching his nephews the novel Great Expectations, and Tom so graciously supported my curriculum and my school's chapter, Charles Dickens chapter of the National English Honor Society, over the years with Dickens scholarship, artifacts, and rare glimpses into the author and the context of his life. Going over the chat, it looks like we have a great mix tonight of teachers and students. And so during the presentation, if you have any questions, please enter them into the chat and we'll do our best to address all of those at the end of the presentation. So please join me in welcoming our guest, an honorary member of the Charles Dickens National English Honor Society chapter, Mr. Tom Wingate.
Hello, everybody. It's a great pleasure for me to be talking to America. What an honor for this British citizen, even though I'm sitting in Mexico City. You can see that the title here is Charles Dickens Relevance for the 21st Century. This writer is so rich, we could talk about so many things, but I want to focus more on social justice issues this evening. So let's get started. I am most grateful for this opportunity to talk to you all wherever you are. Be well, be safe. So here we are, the National English Honor Society. You know, I know, literature matters greatly. In it we study ourselves and our bewildering ways, but do we learn? We are readers, we want to be entertained, but every book that's worth something will change us in some way. And when we read Dickens, that certainly is the case. So there's this confluence of entertainment and the didactic, literature aspirational for ourselves and collectively for society. It allows society to rise above itself, to be better. And that's exactly what Dickens is trying to do. Like Dean Swift, a century before him, more than a century before him, there are moments such as the opening chapters of Oliver Twist, his second novel, where it really feels like this gentleman, Charles Dickens, wants to lash mankind into better shape. So this strange confluence of the entertaining and the making better. So here is a famous green cover from one of the monthly parts of the novel Oliver Twist, and Dickens was very, very careful with the illustrations, because once you get that image in your mind, you won't get it out of your mind. So he worked with various illustrators, principally with Cruikshank, but he was very, very careful looking at the proofs of his works. Now, he did something very, very strange. Here's a young man, and he was almost surprised by success. He wrote the largely comic Pickwick Papers, 1834, and he then did something quite different. If you just read, say, the first 5 chapters of Oliver Twist from 1837, the savage world of the boy Oliver Twist, as it says here, terrible things are happening to a child. Abandoned, starved, corrupted. He's even shot. Sorry about the spoiler. Dickens says, pay attention. And he does it loudly. So, you know, read your Grisham, that's fine, but it's pretty well the same kind of thing. He takes a real right-hand swerve here and says, take a look at the world we live in. I've got something to say. I am a novelist, and I'm going to entertain you, but I'm going to try and change you, and through you, change society. So artistically, commercially, this novel, second one, Oliver Twist, is a tremendous gamble. Now, I don't want to really spend too much time on this, on the rhythm of the plot of Oliver Twist, but like many writers who write in a serial form, and Dickens was one of the very early ones, and he did it so well. It's a bit like, in Spanish you say a telecomedia. It's a serial which has highs and lows, and you get Oliver starting on a low, and then he gets rescued, and then he gets recaptured, and then he goes into a gang. These slides will be shared with you later on, but I just want to say that Dickens really knew how to play his audience. He had a love affair with his audience, and he wanted very much to be loved. He had some pretty serious personal quirks from his own childhood when he was working as a child in a blacking factory, and he never really let go of that. So these children, like Oliver, like David, like little Nell, little Dorrit, there's a lot of his life in these stories, including this boy Oliver Twist, who really nobody knows because his name is invented. He's found, or he's born rather, in the workhouse, and his mother dies. So the ups and downs of the plot. Excuse me. That's the second slide there of the ups and downs of the plot. He has a terrible, terrible time, this poor child. Dickens is saying, this is the world you live in, Victorian England. Pay attention. Early Victorian England. This is not a Cruikshank illustration here. This is by another of his illustrators, but I think it gives you a good idea of that world of Oliver, the famous scene of Oliver saying, please, sir, I want some more. And the way that this man is leaning forward with his great big ladle there as though he's going to beat little Oliver. It's a very evocative scene, a very evocative scene. Now, what in Victorian life is it like for the great majority of the population? Dickens is saying, pay attention. Rapid industrialization in the London slums. There were areas where even the policemen wouldn't go in. At least they wouldn't go alone. They'd go in twos, at least. Combination's an old word for unions. Unions, if they weren't outlawed, were really frowned on. The rights of the worker, really not respected. Child exploitation. I mean, there were jobs that children were doing that would maim them, kill them, and that was just one of those things that you accepted. The new machines in the cotton industry, children had to climb through the machinery to unjam things, and if they got a leg or an arm ripped off, well, that was it. Go up chimneys. Some of them got stuck up there and died. Life was really tough for many people. Marked class divisions, the disparate distribution of national wealth. You had a lot of, not so many, rich people and a lot of people who really were on the breadline. Education was lousy, really poor, highly erratic. It was only until 1870 that by law, primary education was the done thing. You had to do it by law, but that was the year actually that Dickens died. Food. A lot of people were on the breadline, literally. Erratic food supplies, frequent high prices, ignorant medical practices. They were still bleeding people and cupping people. Disease and dirt, outbreaks of cholera and typhoid. It would touch anybody. Typhoid caught Queen Victoria's husband, Prince Albert, a genius in many ways, but that's another story. And he died at a very young age, around 1860. The law was still savage. Many savage punishments existed. Dickens was one of the people, through his writing, through his journalism too. Remember, Dickens is every bit a journalist as he is a novelist. And Dickens hated the public executions. He had those with other people. He had them moved inside prison walls. Corrupt elections. I don't want to make obvious references here. So I'm a Brit, you're American. I'm going to move on. Corrupt elections, bought votes, limited suffrage. These are things that really got under Dickens's skin. And of course, you know, if you look at novels like Bleak House, he has a lot to say about the law and the injustice of a law that works too slowly. Now, the specific context in 1832, just before, a few years before Oliver Twist then, political reform in the UK, especially suffrage, was very much in the air. Now, democracy was still a very dirty word as to the ruling class. Dickens also wasn't saying, let's open the floodgates, let's have everybody with a vote straight away, but he knew that things weren't right. And he had a very poor opinion, actually, of politicians. He was asked to be a politician, a member of parliament, several times and turned it down. He'd been a reporter in the House of Commons and he knew how it operated. It was an absolute bear pit and he wanted nothing to do with it. Now, the thing that really triggered Dickens was 1834. A new poor law came in, and it was designed to be so vicious that anybody in his right mind would not go to the workhouse, would try as much as he or she could to stay out of the workhouse to make a living. And of course, there are always people in society, some people in society who just can't fend for themselves. And and I know, wonderful though the United States is, and I've lived there in Atlanta, you see people on the streets, and so did Dickens. The stuff that Dickens is writing about is very, very pertinent to us, very, very contemporary. So these poor laws just made Dickens see red and was a major stimulus for him changing from the comic world of Pickwick Papers to some savage writing, particularly in the first part of Oliver Twist. Just as I say, take a look at the first five chapters. It's very important to understand with Dickens how his very life informs him. He was, thin-skinned in some ways. His experiences in a blacking factory, as his father ran through the family money, he was a spendthrift, and Dickens was put out to work by his mother. A family relation had a blacking factory down on Wapping Steps, and Dickens never got that out of his chest. He was so mortally offended by that, and the child who is attacked by society, who's exploited, that comes into so much of his literature, throughout his literature. As I say, look at Nell, and who's exploited by her grandfather. Look at David and the Murdstones. Look at little Oliver, of course, who starts the whole ball rolling. This poor law gave him the idea for a literary hammer blow. Dickens didn't do anything by halves, and he wanted to really make a statement. And I believe he did. Now, he has a love affair with his readership, and hopefully he has a love affair with us. I feel very, very strangely, very close to him. He's talking about Victorian society, but he has a relevance for the 21st century. So many of his themes, his social themes, touch us. You in the United States, me in Mexico, my home, my original home in Britain. We know of a lot of sectors of society that need help. And Dickens was acutely aware of that. And he wanted to say, point one here, as you read Oliver Twist, you can't say, I never knew. He's like Alan Paton. He wants to awaken sleeping consciences. If you look at that poem, I Have Approached by Alan Paton, it's a wonderful, teachers out there, a wonderful poem. A poem that says, I don't know how to write at the moment. I'm stuck. And in saying that, he's not stuck. It's the paradox. He writes the poem. So our social blinkers drop when we read Dickens. We can laugh with him. Sure we can. Pickwick Papers is a riot, and his humor, his satire carries through. But it becomes a little more barbed, a little darker. He's got something to say. He sugars the pill. He says, this is funny, but think about it. Actually, it's not so funny. So when you look at Mr. Bumble the Beadle in Oliver Twist, such a bully, such a funny man, such a bully. So he sugars the pill. Dickens gives you both sides. Keen description. If you want to be a time traveler, read Dickens. Keen description. He takes you there. Judicious satire. He knows how to pop balloons. He knows how to jab. Dickens consciously generates righteous anger in us. Now, listen, we don't want to think that we read Dickens to make us angry, but he's going to move us. And great books will do that, and he will do that. He was a wonderful ally of a man called Lord Shaftesbury, the children's champion. So it wasn't just Dickens. Dickens did activate other people, and he liked joining clubs and being the center of attention as well. He was that kind of a guy, but he got heard. People knew him, and people came to listen to him. He was one of the best public speakers of his generation. He knew he had these skills, and he was very generous, lending his time to the various charities and societies that wanted his attention. So in this particular work, this strange shift from the comic to real life England, Oliver is assaulted. This little child is assaulted, and through him so are we. You lose your innocence, folks. But in losing your innocence, in getting that new knowledge, you're empowered. You've got to do something about it. So we sense in Dickens's novels, and this novel, a concentrated distillation of truth. And it's about enlightenment. Dickens is writing about enlightening us. We all wish, I believe, tell me if you don't, but who would not wish to live an enlightened life? In our case, I would say, in many of our cases, a lot has been given to us, and a lot is required of us. So for the world today, like a man who thought a lot of Dickens, George Orwell, his starting point was, my best work is political. Give the voiceless a voice. And that's what Dickens is doing. He goes right down into the dregs of society. He shows the whole gamut, the whole range of society. That's why I think Shakespeare was so powerful for Dickens, because he was doing the same thing. He goes from the comic low characters right up to your dukes and kings. So people accuse Dickens of being a sentimentalist. Well, why not? He does know how to touch our hearts, pull our heartstrings. He's an expert reporter on his times. And humanity's humanity. What was true then is often true now, sadly, in many ways, in terms of social justice. He's like a broadcaster on his own 19th century internet for us. We reach back in time and we see this and this and this, and we say, oh my goodness, some of the things that preoccupied him, they preoccupy me too. So we all have to ask ourselves, as he did, what do we do in and for society, and why do we do it? We have much to learn from him. So as I come to the end of the slides here, let me just dwell on this one, because the talk is about social justice. He had a specific issue in his time with child labor, but look, let's not be blind. I'm not going to point a finger necessarily at international business, but you've heard stories of where those fantastically expensive Nike trainers come from. He was very upset about oppressive laws for the poor. I'm not going to go into chapter and verse about laws in the United States or laws in Britain or laws in Mexico, but there are laws that favor certain strata in society and not others. We live in a global world, folks. In my school, I'm lucky to have over 40 nationalities. And we talk about internationalism a lot. And Dickens speaks to all nations. Eradication of poverty, a fairer distribution of wealth. It's one of the huge issues of his time and of our time. And he can crack open the nut for us when we read his novels. He, as I said earlier on, we can't say we didn't know. He's very keen on living conditions, eradicating disease. He knew it himself when he went down in the social scale when his father was running through the money. When he was working in the blacking factory, rats were actually running across his work desk. He was so keen on education, give children the right education. He only went to Wellington Academy for a few years. And then he was yanked out. They needed him to work. It happens in this country a lot. I love Mexico to bits, but it's got major things to do to shape its education. I've taught in the United States in schools, and may I say, excuse me, as a Brit, there's a lot to do there too. And and I know that's true. He was passionate about children and the right to play and the right to for people to have an enjoyable life. Folks, the examined life, what are we here for? He implicitly and explicitly asked that question. He wants political honesty. I'm not going there. I'm not going there. You can't make me. I know what's happening in the United States at the moment. But political honesty, people of character, of quality, of honesty, who can take a society like Lord Shaftesbury and lead it in a correct and moral direction. These are very, very pertinent, modern 2020 issues. Apply justice and the law swiftly. The issues of justice in your country, in my country, in this country, and many others, unfortunately, they're very much in the front of our minds. They are highly, highly topical, and Dickens had a lot to say about it. I think that it's very common, isn't it, that talking of sugaring the pill, we go to the novels to find out about Charles Dickens and the things he has to say about so many topics. But if you can, try and dip into some of his journalistic writings in his All the Year Round, his magazine, Household Words, and All the Year Round. He did a decade pretty well, the 50s and the 60s. Fantastic journalist, a fantastic editor, a real polyglot, fantastic actor, director, public speaker. I so wish I could time travel and go back to one of his live performances that helped kill him, really. He came over to you in the late 1860s to do his last tour of live readings, and he was told not to. But he really wanted to go back to the United States. He had some apologies to make. Martin Chuzzlewit, he'd annoyed the Americans, and I think he did largely make friends again with the United States. He made a lot of money there with you folks in the 1860s, but the effort of it, particularly the reading of the murder of Nancy the prostitute, and the end of Oliver Twist, really took it out of him. He was poleaxed. He would collapse on stage at the end. And there was a doctor there who actually wrote down his heart rates. And the guy nearly died of heart attacks night after night. Dickens is such an inclusive writer, so funny, so satirical, so serious. He is sentimental in the right sense. He twangs those chords. He resonates inside us. He shows us things that we otherwise wouldn't see. And yes, we see it in a Victorian context, but if we're half intelligent, we can say what he was trying to make better then. It's up to us and our friends and all the other educated people around us to try and make better in society today too. He has much to say. Never stay far away from him. I'm so pleased. I was looking at statistics here. 50% of you in the little survey said that you had Dickens in your curriculum, and something like 30% had Dickens in your curriculum. I think that's a wonderful thing. He is a liberal, tolerant, civilizing force and within the world of literature. And I am very happy to be here talking with you today to promote his cause. But then he doesn't need Tom Wingate. His novels do that so well for themselves. It's been a delight talking with you. I'm going to turn over now to Miss Brianne, Dr. Brianne, excuse me, and
Thank you so much,
thank you
Mr.
very much for your
Wingate. I've
attendance
learned
and
so
your
much, and I'm
presence.
so
Thank you.
excited to take back really this idea of Dickens and social justice to my students. So I look forward to that. Thank you so much. So now what we want to do is give you an opportunity. We have about 5 minutes left to open up for questions in the chat. So I'll give you a moment to add your questions. Multiple attendees are typing, so we have many questions on the way. Okay, so we have one question from Jamie for you about how much do you think that his Christian faith influenced his writing?
Thank you, Jamie. Great question. He was a bit of a maverick with his faith. He was technically an Anglican, a member of the Church of England. He swerved into being a Unitarian for a while, so he didn't. That is, you don't follow a Trinity. You believe in one God, and you don't divide it into Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. But yes, he wrote a book for his children on the life of Jesus. You would call him, in Victorian terms, broad church. He was not very keen on high church, on ritualism. He couldn't stand Catholics, by the way. There was that intolerance in him. But he did go to Italy, and he did admire some of the things that the Catholic Church did there. But to answer your question, yes, there is in the DNA of Dickens. He is being
I
informed
have
by
another
his Christian
question that
faith.
I'm going to
There's no doubt about
create
that.
based on a combination of several of the questions in the chat about what would be your recommendation for the first novel or a student's high school or college, their first exposure to Dickens. Do you have a
Well, perhaps this sounds too simple, but he started with Pickwick Papers. Why not? It's very witty, very funny. But the Dickens that people um, understand in terms of the serious Dickens, I would go with Oliver Twist. I would start with that. And when you're a little more comfortable with the themes and with what he's writing, one that Dr. Brian is also teaching, I understand at the moment. Nothing tops for me Great Expectations. I think it's just a wonderful, honest look at the development of the character of Pip, and I know it's often cited by people in their top five books, but it's still perhaps because of that it's a wonderful book to read. So I definitely have it wherever I go. I'll have a copy of Great Expectations
Thank
with
you
me.
so much, Mr. Wingate. We really appreciate you and everyone here for attending our last webinar of the semester. I know that I have learned so much, and I hope that you have as well. All of the slides from tonight's presentation will be emailed to our participants in the next couple of days. I do know it's 6:30 now, and I want to wish you all a wonderful evening, but Mr. Wingate has agreed to stay back and answer some additional questions if you're interested in staying. If not, again, thank you for coming, and we hope you have a So I see a question here about what is your perspective on hard times and its effect on modern day education?
Oh, I love hard times. When I'm teaching teachers at college, one of the classes I give is chapter one with Mr. Gradgrind. And the strange thing is that it looks so unreal that there were some educational reforms happening, and it really was a question of lifting the top of the cranium off, filling the skull with knowledge, and no more could be fitted in. It's it's a very it's a very bleak book. I find it um, more chilling than many of the other novels by Dickens, because the things that happen to the children, the great grandchildren, they're so cut off from play and from enjoyment, and everything is so bleak and grey. Um, I think it is. It's kind of like an antidote. What I say to my students is, look, take a look at chapter one, do the opposite. That's the way to treat children. To if you start with enjoyment, engaging children, then half the battle's won. But that rigidity, the lines of desks, the Sissy Jupe, who's not even allowed to imagine flowers on a carpet or a curtain. Oh, it's ugly. So I think that it is the one of the ways, one of the things we can do to inform ourselves of how education is not that. It is something that has to really put the child at the center. The last thing in hard times in education is the child at the
Thank
center.
you. So we have many compliments coming your way in the chat. There was one question about if you could please tell us the name.
Thank you. Oh, yes. Fantastic poem. Recommend it highly. Beautiful poem. He's the man, of course, who wrote Cry the Beloved Country, that put the first crack in the dam of apartheid and helped breach the dam of apartheid in South Africa. I'm very proud of the fact, by the way, that my mother knew him years ago. It's called I Have Approached. I Have Approached by Alan Paton, Paton. Fantastic poem. More fantastic for the content than for any stylistic fireworks. But the content speaks to
Well,
you.
I think something is very telling here in the chat that I wanted to make sure that you heard, Mr. Wingate, was a comment by Kelsey, who said, "Thank you for this webinar. I am currently fighting to keep Dickens in our curriculum. This webinar is academic support for my argument that I can teach social justice with any text, not just a modern text."
Oh, fantastic. Well done. All power to you.
Well, I think that's a great note to end on. And again, we just really want to thank you for your time, Mr. Wingate, and thank you for participating.
And if I may just say, Brianne, I want to thank you for making this possible, and for